A very good morning to all of you. I welcome you all to Insarkari and I hope that you all must be doing great. So in this video, we'll be analyzing the newspapers for 9th of March 2023, but these are going to be the Mumbai edition because on account of Holi holiday, the New Delhi edition, they have not been issued, so we'll be taking them up. So Saha is sworn in as the Tripura's chief minister, and Tripura at the same time it wants to BJP. So Tripura basically demand for Tripura land, a separate Tripura state. And Amit Shah promised the constitutional solution to all the issues facing the 14 lakh indigenous people. So constitutional solution is the key word here. And party may extend issue-based support to BJP-led state government. So money laundering laws that we have in India, they will now cover the crypto trade as well. So India's money laundering laws will apply to the trade in cryptocurrencies as per the Union Finance Minister, and the exchange between the virtual digital assets, fiat currencies, the exchange between one or more forms of virtual digital assets, and the transfer of digital assets will be covered under the money laundering laws in India. So one of them is Prevention of Money Laundering Act that we have. And the country, that is India, it is yet to finalize the legislation and regulations surrounding the cryptocurrencies. Even like RBI has cautioned against their use and called for a ban on cryptocurrencies. So that has been the stand of RBI for a very long period of time. And RBI has said that cryptocurrencies should be banned as they are akin to a Ponzi scheme, because we very well know that cryptocurrencies, they are not regulated by, they are not like regulated only, and they're just working on the basis of the supply and demand, and that's how they are fluctuating. And obviously we require a greater authority in monitoring the transfer of these assets abroad as well. So regulation is a very important thing, otherwise they might be used for something that can be dangerous for our security also. So Kerala High Court says that frame a plan to manage the solid waste. Obviously, you need plan for everything. If you need to go in a with a proper process, having a clear mindset about how things are going to be there in future. So plan of management, be it solid waste or be it any other thing, is very important. So we have been seeing this thing that regarding the dump yards, there's been fire, and so the High Court, it hears a suo motu case registered in connection with the fire at Brahmapuram waste treatment plant, which is there in Kochi. And we also discussed about the long-term solutions of tackling such situations. And we also saw that the Indian Air Force helicopters were being used to douse the fire at the dump yard site. So NASA hands over the NISAR satellite to ISRO. So ISRO has received the NASA ISRO SAR. So it stands for NISAR satellite. So N is for NASA and I is for ISRO, and then it is SAR. So satellite from the US agency, and NISAR is a low Earth orbit observatory which is jointly developed by NASA and ISRO. So the satellite is going to map the entire globe in 12 days and provide spatially and temporally consistent data for understanding the changes in the Earth's ecosystems, ice mass, vegetation biomass, sea level rise. So everything basically, it will be an Earth observation satellite. So it carries L and S dual band synthetic aperture radar, which operates with the sweep SAR technique to achieve large swathes with high resolution data. So that's there. And we also discussed about this thing about the re-entry of MT1 satellite. So ISRO has successfully carried out the controlled re-entry experiment of the MT1 satellite. So, ISRO on Tuesday successfully carried out the controlled re-entry experiment for the decommissioned Megatropics 1 satellite, and the space agency executed the final two deboost burns at 11:02 Universal Time Coordinated. So in this picture also it is showing the final two deboost burns. They were executed at this time. So yesterday we talked about the importance of total digital literacy when we were basically talking and discussing it in the context of the role women can play in terms of poverty reduction, in terms of nutritional security, and apart from, uh, you know, having more economic opportunities. So to arrest or not to arrest is the question. And the arrest of the former Delhi Deputy Chief Minister Manish Sisodia, obviously this case, everyone knows about it. And he's been arrested by CBI recently, has once again created a debate about the fundamentals of the law enforcement. So many have criticized the CBI's move as unwarranted, one that was actuated by the political considerations. Definitely, it has some political angles also, but unfortunately, only a few seem to understand the intricacies of the underlying provisions of the law on the arrest. So the two sides, it includes that arrest, it involves a grave human rights issue, often ignored by many law enforcement officials, and the debate on the rightness or otherwise of an arrest will remain unresolved. So this writer faced the dilemma when he was heading the CBI more than 2 decades ago, and a majority of his deputies fell in line with him whenever he advocated moderation and advised that arrest should be made only when absolutely warranted. And there were a few hawks in his team who disagreed with what they considered as his soft approach. So basically, he's talking about a case study. So while the debate on the rightness or otherwise of an arrest will remain unresolved, those within the system, they have the responsibility to uphold sobriety and objectivity. So that is very important. And obviously, political interest, they should not interfere in the investigation. So procedure of arrest, we have the Code of Criminal Procedure 1973, which lays down the procedure to effect an arrest. And Section 41 debunks the commonly held belief that a police officer must necessarily obtain a warrant from a magistrate before making an arrest. So arrests, they can be made without a warrant provided the officer making it is convinced that there was no time to obtain one and records the reasons in the general diary of the police station or the police branch concerned for not obtaining a warrant prior to the arrest. So everything has to be written down, the reasons behind the arrest, if it was made without, getting a warrant. And the main stipulation of the law and judicially accepted norms are that the officer should not use any force to effect an arrest unless the accused himself chooses to be violent. So there we have the fundamental right under Article 22 of the Constitution. So that says that a detained person should be apprised of the grounds of arrest as soon as possible and be produced before the nearest magistrate within 24 hours, excluding the travel time of taking him into custody. So that's what Article 22 says. And it is also incumbent on the official concerned to keep the closest relative of the accused informed that the person is in custody at a specified place. So this is also there. And beyond these safeguards, there is nothing in the Criminal Procedure Code that reduces the discretion of the police or the law enforcement officials in making an arrest decision. So this is where the shoe pinchers and the investigators, they enjoy absolute freedom in opting for an arrest. And it is his judgment alone that influences a decision. And in often quoted D.K. Basu versus State of Bengal case also, while the top court laid down the detailed procedures for an arrest, it did not in any way dilute the discretion of a law enforcement agency in making the arrest. So that's like we also have a Supreme Court judgment regarding this issue, but again, it is lacking in certain terms. So that is the whole case. We talked about Article 22. And looking within, so given this scenario, how do we ensure that arrests they are made in the most scrupulous manner, not influenced by the vested interest? So when the law is silent in the matter, it is the basic responsibility of the senior law enforcement officers at the center and in the states to ensure sobriety and objectivity of the arrest being made. And this is difficult in a politically charged ambience where many governments bring enormous pressure on the senior officers to dramatize the opportunity and make vindictive arrests to settle personal scores and influence public opinion. So that's what obviously political parties try to do, and officers investigating the sensational cases involving high personages require protection and guidance by the higher echelons. So if the later they fail to stand up to the unethical pressures, nothing can save us from blatantly unjust arrest in India. So an arrest in any other circumstance will be basically subject to scrutiny by the courts, and where bias is writ large, the later will come down heavily on the investigating officer with legal action taken against him if need be. So, challenge for a change, Iran must opt for reforms and freedoms, especially for women. So, women, they don't enjoy basically the reasonable freedom which should be given to them in Iran. And the remark by Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei that poisoning schoolgirls is an unforgivable crime is a de facto confirmation of the reports that thousands of girls across the Islamic Republic they've been subject to poison attacks over the last few months. So, for such incidents, it was reported in November in the holy city of Qom, amidst the women's protests that were triggered by the death of Iranian Kurdish woman Mahsa Amini. So, even this was very like highlighted in the news. So, from that point of time, we are seeing that girls, basically school girls, they were being poisoned, and this is very scary thing which is happening there. So initially there were two theories, with the first suggesting that it could be an act by religious extremists opposed to girls attending the schools, and the second was that psychological factors could be the reason, at least in some cases. So that's there. And Iran, unlike Afghanistan under the Taliban, does not have a history of preventing the girls from attending the schools. So even in Afghanistan post the Taliban regime, we are seeing that various restrictions are being imposed on women. And after the Islamic Revolution of 1979, the regime imposed restrictions on women but encouraged their education and joining the workforce. So their education and employment was not hampered even after the Islamic Revolution of 1979. And according to the World Bank, female literacy it rose from 26% in 1976 to 85% in 2021. So, for more than a decade, women have consistently outnumbered men in the Iran's universities. So, they are basically trying to show that education has not been impacted as far as women are concerned in Iran. So, given this history, it is surprising that schoolgirls they are being targeted, something which did not happen even at the peak of the revolution. So, why is it happening now? What is the reason that needs to be looked into? And therefore, such incidents they should jolt the authorities into action. And it may not be a coincidence that the targeting of the schoolgirls occurs at a time when thousands of women, including schoolgirls, have been demanding more freedoms. But the regime's response has been brutal, and mullahs they should realize that if the economic and social crisis persist, they would further weaken a regime that is already seeing waves of protest. So the wave of protest is as much a challenge to the regime as it is an opportunity to drive the political reforms, and the mullahs should embrace the latter to address the former, that is, to address the protests. So promoting, we've been discussing about promoting tourism, be it rural tourism, or now we're talking about border tourism. So we even have schemes to promote to develop infrastructure at the border villages. that is the Vibrant Villages program, and we've talked about it a lot of number of times. So last December, the Chief of Defense Staff General Anil Chauhan, he spoke of the need to repopulate vast unoccupied areas located even far away from the last villages of the state towards the border, and he emphasized the importance of promoting border tourism in such areas. So the government of India has made unprecedented efforts to build border infrastructure. It has also announced plans to open villages along the northern border for tourists under the Vibrant Villages program, as I just said. And India's tremendous tourism potential in its border states remains largely untapped due to the remoteness of the locations and difficulty of access. And apart from the infrastructure deficit, even adventure sports, mountaineering, and related commercial activities are subject to cumbersome security procedures and the permits often by multiple agencies. So this is even making things much more difficult when we are talking about promoting border tourism. So encouraging tourism is definitely an untapped potential, and tourism potential of the Karakoram Pass, which is there in Ladakh, cannot be overstated. Regular motorcycle expeditions, they should be organized for civilians in cooperation with the India's major motorcycle manufacturers. So this is one area. And then similarly, when we talk about the Pangong Lake in Ladakh, it is a tourist paradise. The area around the Pangong Lake and the Trishul is a delight for the photographers and the bird watchers. And in the Chagthang Wildlife Sanctuary, which is there in Ladakh, there are wetlands and thriving population of the Kiang, which is a wild ass. So there's Larry Peak. It is sacred to both Hindus and Buddhists. Then in the Demchuk area, it is home to several hot springs that are popular for the naturopathy cures. So basically, there are like so many things when we're talking about the border tourism, which are available only in Ladakh itself. Then in the central sector, we have the Mana Pass in Chamoli, Uttarakhand. It is one of the highest vehicle accessible passes in the world. And Mana village, it is steeped in mythology as the gateway to heaven also. So it is close to the Hemkund and the Valley of Flowers. And then definitely we have the Badrinath Shrine. It is located nearby. There is Diotal Lake near the Mana, which can be developed for sailing, and nearby slopes offer a good site for skiing as well. So there is like the Nilang Jodang Valley. So you can find out more about its location. There is Niti Valley and the eponymous Mana village close to the line of actual control in Uttarakhand. They have considerable potential. Apart from that, coming to Sikkim, the region around the Dokala is ripe for tourism. So we have Pradong, Nathang Valley, Zulu Kupup, there is Baba Harbhajan Mandir, and the Yak Gold Course. So this is the highest golf course in the world. And all of these areas, they are nearby. In the eastern sector, the Bumla Pass, which is in Arunachal Pradesh, is already a well-established tourism hub. So there is scope to bring in more tourists all the way up to 0 Point, the side of border personal meeting with China. That's there. Apart from that, further in the upper Subansiri district, there is Taksing is surrounded by beautiful river valleys, virgin rainforest, and scenic camping sites. So there are Buddhist sites also located there, Buddhist pilgrimage sites. So though many border areas, they are remote and they're sparsely populated, every effort should be made to promote hubs of civilian presence and arrangements for homestays. And even obviously foreigners, they can add value since they use social media platforms to publicize their travels. And a word of caution, so military's deployment still remains the mainstay of the livelihood for local residents in many remote places, and this should change in favor of the commercial activity, including tourism. So the priority should be to build all-weather roads, rest houses, restrooms, fuel pumps, health clinics, electricity, telecom towers, medical facilities in suitable areas. So the basic infrastructure that needs to be there. And so it is equally important to ensure that tourism projects they are implemented after conducting feasibility studies. And unbridled construction in violation of the norms leads to subsidence in the Himalayan belt, and we have already seeing its impacts in Joshimath in different states as well. So infrastructure which is built in a sustainable manner and benefits the local economy should be encouraged when we are going ahead with building the basic infrastructure. So small debris orbiting the Earth, it poses threats to the space assets. So close to 14,000 trackable fragmented space debris, they are orbiting Earth right now. So 14,000, though they are trackable. So we're talking about space junk, and so you can see that fragmentation debris, it is increasing. Spacecraft satellites, they're increasing. The rocket bodies, they're increasing. So that everything is sharply increasing, and obviously this is pointing towards the fact that the debris is also going to increase in future. So Pakistan's remarks on Kashmir are frivolous, and permanent representative to the UN Ruchira Kamboj terms Pakistan finance minister's remarks baseless, politically motivated, says it is unworthy even to respond to such malicious propaganda. She also condemns violence against women and girls perpetrated by the terrorists in Pakistan. So terrorism and extremism continue to be the biggest violators of human rights and a persistent threat to the global peace. So we also talked about the situation of women in Iran and in Afghanistan as well. So integrated medicine system is going to alter the future of disease management. So we were talking about having a plan for management for dump yards. So here we're talking about disease management in terms of the health sector. So using yoga as an additional treatment can help patients suffering from the migraine headaches and from syncope, according to two papers which were recently published in the prestigious journals of American College of Cardiology and the American Academy of Neurology. So they say that using yoga as an adjunctive therapy is superior to standalone standard therapy in reducing the symptomatic burden and improving the quality of life in patients with recurrent vasovagal syncope, which is a sudden drop in the heart rate and blood pressure leading to fainting. So they are highlighting the importance of yoga, and in a unique collaboration, 19 departments at AIMS, including cardiology, gastroenterology, and phonology, then internal medicines, neurology, psychiatry, uh, gynecology, with community oncology, they are collectively working to identify the areas of need where allopaths find modern medicines wanting and feel that the addition of a traditional medicine they could try it could provide relief to the patients. So that is there, and we also having national health stack when we're talking about collecting data and talk about health IDs, which is important. Apart from that, integral to the healthcare is basically traditional Ayurveda, homeopathy, and yoga. They are like not alternative medicines as they are often termed, but are rather integral to the healthcare. So these three areas, they are often termed as alternative medicines, but at the same time, they are very integral to the healthcare sector. So the scientific findings from the AIMS research is expected to align with the center's plan to roll out one nation, one health system policy by 2030. And traditionally, yoga is known to resist the automatic changes and impairment of the cellular immunity by the modern medicine demands proof of the clinical efficacy and the safety. And we also talk about the cost of the modern healthcare. It is very high, and many drugs they have side effects at the same time that compel about 10% of people to stop using them. We talk about the out of pocket health expenditure, which is although it is coming down, but still it remains at a very high level. So center will work to further the women's empowerment. Prime Minister says, addressing and giving his greetings on the International Women's Day that we celebrate on 8th March every year. So he lauded the role of women in the country's progress and said his government would keep working to further their empowerment. It was like we greatly cherish the role of women in India's progress, and that's there. So he also like on Twitter he shared a compilation, The Women Achievers, whose life journeys were chronicled in his monthly radio address, Man Ki Baat also. So you need to find out that journal. It becomes very important about which all personalities have been talked about and they have been mentioned and celebrated in this journal. So even state-wise, we can have collaboration when we talk about promotion of tourism. So here we see Assam and Maharashtra. They are arriving at a plan to promote tourism. So trying to promote the state as a hub for filmmaking. Assam officials say that there was 511 percentage and 763 percentage growth in the inflow of domestic and the foreign tourists there. So figures are for 2022 and 21 respectively. So when we talk about the National Road Safety Plan, vision screening becomes very critical. And coming to the world page, so there's an open road for the Russians if they capture Bakhmut, coming from the president of Ukraine. So this region becomes very, very important. And if it is captured by Russia, so it will be having very easy roads, inroads to Ukraine. And it would become very difficult to prevent them from reaching even their capital city. So Russia's Wagner mercenary group, it claimed to have captured the eastern bank of the Bakhmut. So they have already captured a portion of it, which is the industrial town in the eastern Ukraine, where fighting between Russia and Ukraine forces, it has raged for months. So the fight for this region has been the longest and the bloodiest one. The United Nations says that Afghanistan is the world's most repressive country for women, and despite initial promises, Taliban have imposed harsh measures since seizing power in 2021 on women freedom. So, more investments coming into Adani, and GDP may grow by less than 7% in financial year 2023. So, penciling in just 4% GDP growth for the fourth quarter, a rating agency has said that the final growth numbers for the full year will be lower than the second advanced estimate of 7%. So when we talk about the first quarter growth, it was at 13.2%. In second quarter, it was 6.3%. In third quarter, it was 4.4%. And let's see what is going to be the figure for the fourth quarter. So it is important that investors, they must link their PAN cards to Aadhaar by 31st March. So the Securities and Exchange Board of India, which is the capital markets regulator, so it is important that if you're an investor, you need to have your PAN card and Aadhaar card linked before 31st of March. Coming to the Indian Express. Again, this is Mumbai's edition, but we'll be taking out the important things for us. So in this picture, you can see the Australian Prime Minister is celebrating Holi with the Gujarat's Chief Minister in Ahmedabad. So this is Economic Survey 2020-23 and important things for Maharashtra. Talk about Maharashtra's per capita income. This has been increasing and right now it is at 2.42 lakh rupees. There is increase in road accidents and agriculture and the allied sector growth was at 10.2 percentage due to good monsoon that was recorded. There was production of oil seeds, cotton, sugarcane to increase while the pulse output drops. So you can have a look that we grow sugarcane, cotton, oil seeds in Maharashtra state. And apart from that, less than 50% fund from SC and ST schemes have been spent in the state. Registration of electric vehicles is sees a jump. So that is how things are basically changing. Coming to the editorial page. So these are basically the same editorials that we saw in yesterday's newspaper. These are exactly the same. So Sri Lanka, it closes in on $2.9 billion of IMF deal after support from China. So finally, it has received the go ahead from even IMF. So here in this table, you can see when we have a look at women in different parts of the world. So in Pakistan, women in major cities, they conducted the march and they were protesting amidst the tight security. So they were aimed at seeking rights guaranteed by the constitution. In Afghanistan, we only already know that women are in the most repressive situation in Afghanistan, whose freedom, whose basic rights are being denied to them by the Taliban regime. In Spain, there is like a day prior, they passed a new law which required that women must make up at least 40% of the boards of the directors of listed companies. In Philippines, we saw hundreds of protesters from various women's groups rallied for higher wages and decent jobs. In Japan, which is ranked 116 out of 146 countries on the gender parity in a World Economic Forum global report last year, the chief said that more progress had to be done. And Canada, it scrapped the historic indecency and anti-abortion laws targeting women and the LGBTQ plus community. In Ireland, it announced that it will hold a referendum to remove discriminatory language in its constitution. So we can have a look, try to understand the position of women in different parts of the world. And for the very first time in 25 years, women enlist in the Colombia's army. So women constitute around 1% of South American countries' army of the 2 lakh soldiers that they have. So we already discussed about even this thing also. So we can just have a look at what is the Hindu rate of growth and is India headed there or not. And this is again a repeat. So our former RBI Governor Raghurajam Sir has said that saying that India is dangerously close to the Hindu rate of growth, because when we analyze the quarterly growth rate, that on that basis we are saying it. And apart from that, the data in question, it pertains to India's GDP growth. That is, we recorded 4.4% growth in the third quarter. And data since the beginning of financial year 2016-17, it shows a steady deacceleration in India's quarterly GDP growth rate. So let's understand what do we mean by the Hindu rate of growth. So it was basically, we use this expression for in 1982 it was used by the economist Raj Krishna, who taught at the DSE and he served on the planning commission also, and also the 7th finance commission. Then basically when we had a growth rate between 3 to 4 percentage points, that was known to be said that it was the Hindu rate of growth, and it was recorded between the period of 19 70s to 1990s. So that's when we use this expression. And then this is a kind of a political question, that was it Nehru's fault? So in his 2007 paper, The Recovery of India Economic Growth in Nehru Era, Corporal Balakrishna, he's professor of economics at Ashoka University. He sought to provide the context of India's growth record during 1951 to 64 period, and between 1950 and 64, India's average annual GDP and GDP per capita growth was around 4.1 and 1.9 percentage respectively. And India's growth rate during the Nehru era was higher than China's, that was 2.9% over the same period, though it was lower than the growth rate of Korea. So, according to Balakrishnan, uh, Krishna's lament over the independent India's record of growth until the late 1970s derived from his use of the per capita GDP as his measure, which marks the degree of progress made in the Nehru era. So, between 1900 and 1946, India's population grew at 0.8 percentage annually, and in the Nehru era, this number was 2 percentage point. So despite that, we recorded a good amount of GDP growth rate even during the Nehru era. So when did India outgrow the Hindu rate of growth? Obviously, it was post the 1991 structural reforms that we had, and it was only then and only after that that we were able to come out of this, basically this range of the Hindu rate of growth. And here even like we're analyzing the numbers which are suggesting that are we really reverting back to the Hindu rate right now or not. So that is just only on the basis of figures that we are saying that, but let's see what is going to happen in the future, because only then we can say that are we like, have we really achieved a Hindu rate of growth or not, or we are moving upwards. So what about the argument that growth is higher if one does not consider the revisions of the past GDP levels? So this is in the context of the past GDP levels, that it is saying that what if the growth is higher if we do not consider the revisions of the past GDP levels? So data released last month, it showed India had grown faster in each of the past 3 years than what was previously reported, while a higher base meant that the current year's growth rate, it is lower than what was expected, and this data is likely to be revised in the coming months and years, obviously. And things as they stand today, India is still far from the 3.5 percentage level that is associated with the Hindu rate of growth. So we're still far away from it, and not as much a concern for us right now. So inverted yield curve, I hope you must have heard about this term. So basically, short-term rate rise, it is a sign of tightening liquidity, possibility of another rate hike in future. So inverted yield curve basically means that the yield which are there on the short-term maturity bonds, that increases compared to the yield of the long-term maturities. Otherwise, it has to be the other way around, but that's when we say that it is the inverted yield curve, it is created, and this is a sign of possibility of another rate hike and tightening liquidity in the economy. So there has been 200% growth in the digital payment volume in the past 4 years, and apart from that, 50 times growth in 4 years in UPI transactions, 10 times in the 4 years in the growth of Aadhaar enabled payment systems transactions. So government has imposed PMLA provisions against cryptocurrency. This we have already had a look at. So Prevention of Money Laundering Act is the law that would now be governing and regulating the cryptocurrency transactions. And banking system liquidity turns surplus on the higher deposit growth and government spending. So higher government spending, which is also increasing the deposit base of the banking system, played an important role. So SEBI tightens norms for securities buyback. So we are seeing that SEBI is trying to strongly and is tightening the securities market, and it is also strongly monitoring and regulating the capital market, obviously, after the whole Adani issue. So that's all for today. Thank you for joining in, Sarkari. And that was all because since it was a holy holiday, so we were analyzing the Mumbai edition of these two newspapers. And you will be also getting the PDF link in the description box. So do not forget to subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share this video as much as possible.